The family heirloom. Truth is a treasure that outlives the storm, my grandfather whispered the last time I saw him. I didn't understand then, now I do. My name is Elijah Carter, and last month I watched my family try to steal my rightful inheritance from under my nose. I stood in Grandpa James's historic brownstone in Boston's Beacon Hill, the one he'd promised would be mine since I was 10, clutching the weathered envelope he'd left me. The family lawyer had just finished reading the will, and my Aunt Victoria's perfectly manicured hand was already reaching for the house keys. Eli, sweetheart, you have to understand, Aunt Victoria said, her voice coated with artificial concern. This house needs extensive renovation. The Historical Society requirements alone would bankrupt you. Bankrupt me? I stared at her, then at my Uncle Richard, who suddenly found the antique Persian rug fascinating. By selling it without even consulting me? My cousin Parker leaned against the mahogany bookcase, his Harvard Business School swagger on full display. Come on, be realistic. You could never handle the property taxes in this neighborhood. Not on a journalist's salary. The familiar scent of Grandpa's pipe tobacco still lingered in the air. Just 2 weeks ago, we'd sat in his study discussing my latest investigative piece while he shared stories about his days as a civil rights attorney. Now my relatives were circling his legacy like vultures over roadkill. You can't do this, I said, my voice trembling with rage. Grandpa left it to me. It's right there in the will. Actually, my cousin Madeline chimed in, examining her French manicure, Aunt Victoria has power of attorney. The sale's already gone through. I felt the blood drain from my face. What sale? We found an excellent buyer, Aunt Victoria said, smoothing her cashmere sweater. A real estate developer who appreciates the property's potential. She's offered significantly above market value. My fingers tightened around Grandpa's envelope. It had arrived by courier this morning with explicit instructions to open it only after the will reading. Get out, I whispered. Don't be melodramatic, Elijah, Uncle Richard finally spoke. We're family. Family? I laughed, the sound hollow in the book-lined study. Family doesn't do this. Get out of my grandfather's house. Now. They filed out, Aunt Victoria pausing at the door. We're meeting the buyer tomorrow to finalize everything. You should join us. Make peace with it. Once alone, I sank into Grandpa's leather chair and opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of his letterhead and a small brass key. My dear Elijah, it began. If you're reading this, they've done exactly what I feared they would. But don't worry. I've prepared for this possibility. Check behind the loose brick in the fireplace, the one with the small notch on the bottom left corner. I was on my feet immediately, heart racing. Grandpa had always said that justice required both patience and preparation. Looks like he'd left me both. The law offices of Martinez and Associates smelled like leather and coffee. I placed Grandpa's documents on Camila Martinez's desk. The papers I'd found behind that fireplace brick had kept me awake all night. Well, Camila said, adjusting her glasses, your grandfather was certainly thorough. Can they really sell the house without my consent? She smiled, the kind of smile that made me sit up straighter. That's the interesting part. Your grandfather added a specific clause to his will 4 months ago. The house cannot be sold without your explicit written consent regardless of any power of attorney. But Aunt Victoria said the sale's already gone through. Which means, Camila leaned forward, someone forged your signature. My hands gripped the armrests. What? Look here. She pulled out a document. This is supposedly your signature on the sale agreement, but on this date, she tapped the paper, you were in Chicago covering that corruption trial, correct? Yes. I have hotel receipts, airplane tickets, everything. Keep them handy. We'll need them. Camila started typing on her computer. The buyer, Alexandra Reynolds, is coming in today. She should know her purchase isn't valid. You really think we can stop this? Stop it? Elijah, we can reverse it. And whoever forged your signature could face serious consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from Madeline. Aunt V is furious you went to a lawyer. Says you're betraying the family. I showed Camila the message. She shook her head. Interesting how they define betrayal. A knock interrupted us. A woman in her 40s walked in, elegant in a tailored suit, looking more concerned than a legitimate buyer should. "Ms. Reynolds," Camila gestured to a chair. "Please join us." "I assume this is about the house?" Alexandra glanced at me. "Your aunt assured me everything was in order." "My aunt lied," I said flatly. "And I never signed those papers." Her face paled. "What?" Camila slid the documents across her desk. "The sale requires Mr. Carter's consent. This signature is forged. He was in another state that day." Alexandra ran a hand through her dark hair. "They told me you'd agreed, that you just couldn't be there for the signing." "They told you wrong," I said. "That house has been in my family for 4 generations. My grandfather was one of Boston's most respected civil rights attorneys. That home isn't just real estate to me." "I know," she interrupted. "Your aunt mentioned you were difficult about letting go. Said you were too emotional about it." Something in her tone made me pause. "What else did they tell you?" She hesitated, then reached for her briefcase. "I think you should see these emails. Your family has been planning this for months. They were quite persistent about rushing the sale." As she laid out printed emails on Camila's desk, I heard my grandfather's words in my head again. "Truth is a treasure that outlives the storm." He'd known. He'd known all along what they would try to do. The emails made me sick. Aunt Victoria had been shopping the house around to developers for months, while Grandpa was still alive. "Your aunt mentioned there might be resistance," Alexandra said, pointing to one particular message. "She said you were too attached to see the investment opportunity." Investment opportunity? I read the email's date. This was sent 3 days after Grandpa's funeral. Camila sorted through the papers. "Ms. Reynolds, would you be willing to make a formal statement about these communications?" "Yes," she nodded. I should have asked more questions when they insisted on rushing everything. Something felt off. My phone buzzed again, Parker calling. I declined it. "There's more," Alexandra said quietly. "Your aunt mentioned something about items in the house. Valuable things your grandfather had hidden away." I remembered the key from Grandpa's letter. "Hidden where?" She wouldn't say. "Just that they needed to secure the house quickly before you had a chance to," she trailed off. "Before I had a chance to what?" "Find whatever it is your grandfather left for you." Camila gathered the emails into a folder. "This is excellent evidence of premeditation, Elijah. We should." The office door burst open. Aunt Victoria stood there in her Chanel suit, with Madeline hovering behind her. "Elijah, what do you think you're doing?" Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing." I held up the forged document. "Care to explain this?" She barely glanced at it. "Alexandra, we had a deal." "A deal based on fraud," she replied, standing up. "I'm withdrawing my offer." Aunt Victoria's composure cracked. "You can't do that. We've already allocated the funds." "Allocated?" I stood too. "You mean spent money you didn't have yet?" Madeline stepped forward. "Eli, please. The foundation needs this. The endowment." "What about the endowment?" I demanded. Aunt Victoria shot Madeline a warning look. "That's enough. Elijah, you're making a terrible mistake. That house is nothing but a burden." "Then why are you so desperate to sell it?" I pulled out Grandpa's letter. "What exactly are you afraid I'll find?" Her eyes fixed on the envelope. For the first time I saw real fear there. "Whatever you think you know," she said carefully, "you don't understand the whole picture." "Then explain it to me. What's hidden in that house that's worth forging my signature for?" The silence stretched. Finally, Aunt Victoria turned to leave but paused at the door. "Some secrets," she said quietly, "should stay buried with the dead." As she left, Camila picked up her phone. "I'm calling in a favor. We need to get into that house tonight before they try anything else." Parker cornered me in the parking lot as I left Camila's office. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, blocking my path to my car. "Aunt Victoria and Uncle Richard put everything they had into this deal. Everything they had or everything they stole? He grabbed my arm. Listen to me. The foundation is underwater. The endowment's been mismanaged. Uncle Richard made some risky investments. I yanked free. So that makes it okay to steal my inheritance? Your inheritance? He laughed bitterly. You were always his favorite. Every holiday, every family dinner, it was always about precious Elijah, the crusading journalist following in Grandpa's noble footsteps. That's not true. No? Then why did he leave you the house? Why did he spend hours showing you his case files in that study while the rest of us watched from outside? A car door slammed nearby. Madeline approached, her designer heels clicking on the asphalt. They're meeting tonight, she said, not meeting my eyes. At the Harbor Hotel. About the house. Parker spun around. Madeline, shut up. No. She crossed her arms. I'm done lying. Aunt V and Uncle Richard are planning something, Eli. Something big. Why are you telling me this? Because. She hesitated. Because I found something in Aunt Victoria's study. Financial records about Grandpa's estate that don't match what was in the will. Parker stepped toward her. You had no right to go through those papers. And you had no right to forge our cousin's signature. Madeline shot back. I stared at my cousin. You forged my signature? He at least had the decency to look ashamed. Aunt Victoria said it was the only way. We needed the money fast before the audit, Madeline cut in. The foundation is being investigated for financial misconduct. They needed clean money to cover their tracks. My phone buzzed. Camila texting, got the keys. Meet at the house in 30 minutes. I have to go, I said, pushing past Parker. Eli, wait. Madeline called. The meeting tonight. It's at 8 o'clock, room 512. They don't know I know, but I heard Aunt Victoria on the phone. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. Parker grabbed her arm. You're going to regret this. No. She pulled away. I'm done being part of this mess. Grandpa wouldn't have wanted this. I looked at my cousins, Parker, angry and defensive, Madeline finally showing her spine. Thanks for telling me, Madeline. But why now? She smiled sadly. Because Grandpa once told me that doing the right thing late is better than never doing it at all. As I drove away, I texted Camila. Change of plans. We need to crash a meeting tonight. And bring your phone to record everything. The pieces were finally falling into place. Whatever secrets that house held, I had a feeling we'd find them all tonight. Room 512 of the Harbor Hotel had a connecting door to 514, where Camila and I pressed our ears against the wall. Aunt Victoria's voice came through clearly thanks to the hotel's thin walls. The audit committee arrives Monday, she was saying. If we don't have that money transferred by then. We know, Victoria, Uncle Richard interrupted. But Elijah's lawyer is causing problems. Then fix it, Richard. We didn't spend 20 years building the James Carter Foundation to watch it crumble because your father decided to play the righteous whistleblower from beyond the grave. I started recording on my phone. What about the documents? A new voice, Alexandra's. You promised there were valuable historical papers hidden in the house. There are, Aunt Victoria snapped. James, that sanctimonious old man, he had evidence. Records of everything. And you're sure they're in the house? Alexandra asked. In the study, Uncle Richard said. Behind the wooden panels. That's why we need to move fast. Camila scribbled on her notepad. Foundation fraud? The audit team will find everything, Aunt Victoria continued. The misdirected grants, the fake charities, the offshore accounts. James knew. That's why he changed his will at the end. Why he left everything to Elijah. He was protecting the evidence, Uncle Richard sighed. Making sure we couldn't get to it. Well, he failed, Aunt Victoria's voice hardened. Once we get back in that house. A loud crack interrupted her. Madeline had entered their room. Aunt Victoria? Uncle Richard? What's going on? Madeline. What are you doing here? I followed you. I heard everything. Honey, this doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me? You're embezzling from Grandpa's foundation. From Elijah. We're protecting our family's legacy, Aunt Victoria insisted. By committing fraud? Madeline's voice cracked. By forging signatures and hiding evidence? Your uncle and I had no choice, Aunt Victoria said. The foundation was failing. Because you were stealing from it. Madeline shouted. Grandpa figured it out, didn't he? That's why he changed his will. Silence fell, then Uncle Richard spoke quietly. How long have you known? Long enough. I found the real accounts. The ones you hide from the auditors. Grandpa didn't leave clues just for Elijah. He left them for all of us, to see who would do the right thing. Camila touched my arm, nodding toward the door. We had enough recorded, but I couldn't move, transfixed by my cousin's courage. I'm calling the police, Madeline said firmly. Like hell you are. Aunt Victoria snarled. Something crashed. Madeline screamed, and suddenly doing the right thing became a lot more urgent than family secrets. I burst through the connecting door just as Aunt Victoria grabbed Madeline's phone and smashed it against the wall. Get your hands off her, I shouted. Everyone froze. Uncle Richard stood by the window, pale and shaking. Alexandra backed toward the door. Aunt Victoria still had Madeline's arm in a death grip. Well, Aunt Victoria said, eerily calm. The prodigal nephew joins us. Camila stepped in behind me, her phone clearly recording. I suggest you let her go, Victoria, unless you'd like assault charges added to the fraud. Aunt Victoria released Madeline, who scrambled to my side. You recorded everything, didn't you? Every word, I confirmed. The foundation fraud, the embezzlement, the document theft. All of it. You don't understand, Uncle Richard pleaded. The foundation was failing. So you decided to steal from your own father? I cut him off. To forge documents and hide evidence? Alexandra cleared her throat. I think it's time I made a full statement about my involvement. Aunt Victoria whirled on her. You wouldn't dare. Actually, she pulled out her own phone. I've been recording too, ever since you first approached me about rushing the sale. Something felt wrong and now I know why. You're all making a terrible mistake, Aunt Victoria said, but her perfect facade was cracking. Madeline touched my arm. The documents, Eli, they're not just financial records. They're evidence that Uncle Richard and Aunt Victoria have been misusing foundation grants for years. Directing money to fake charities that funneled it back to them. Grandpa discovered it when he found unauthorized payments. Uncle Richard sank into a chair. Dad confronted me 4 months ago. Said he had proof. That's when he changed his will. I realized when he added that clause about my consent. I said. He knew you'd try to sell the house. Knew we'd need to get to those documents before the audit, Aunt Victoria said bitterly. Camila was already on her phone. Yes, detective. Room 512 at the Harbor Hotel. We have multiple confessions recorded. Aunt Victoria lunged for her, but I stepped between them. It's over, Aunt Victoria. Grandpa gave me that house for a reason, to protect his legacy from people like you. People like me? She laughed hysterically. I built that foundation while he judged us all from his moral high ground. No, Madeline said quietly. You destroyed what Grandpa built. He was trying to save us. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Uncle Richard buried his face in his hands. Alexandra moved to block the door. The documents, I said. Are they still in the house? Aunt Victoria's silence was answer enough. I turned to Camila. We need to get there first. She nodded. I'll call for a warrant. As the sirens grew closer, I watched my family's facade crumble, built on lies, destroyed by truth. Grandpa would have been proud. The police found the documents exactly where Uncle Richard said they'd be, hidden behind the wooden panels in Grandpa's study. Financial records, fake charity registrations, offshore account details, all meticulously documented and annotated in my grandfather's precise handwriting. Your uncle and aunt turned the foundation into their personal slush fund, Detective Reyes explained as we watched the evidence being carefully catalogued. Years of misdirected grants, fake recipients, fabricated programs. Parker showed up as they were loading the last box of documents. "What have you done, Eli?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "Me? I'm not the one who turned Grandpa's life's work into a criminal enterprise." "They're going to prison," he said, shoulders slumping. "Our family is going to prison." Madeline stepped forward. "They made their choice, Parker. Just like you did when you forged Eli's signature." The detective perked up at that. "Is that an admission of forgery?" Parker's face crumpled. "Aunt Victoria promised no one would get hurt." "But people did get hurt," I said softly. "Grandpa spent his last months discovering his own children were criminals. The foundation he built to fight for justice was being used to fund their lavish lifestyle. Every principle he stood for was betrayed." "Ms. Martinez." An evidence technician called out. "We found something else." Camila joined us as they pulled out a metal lockbox from behind the last panel. My heart jumped. It was the perfect size for the key Grandpa had left me. "That's private property," Parker protested. "Actually," Camila smiled, "according to the will, everything in this house belongs to Elijah." The key fit perfectly. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a USB drive. "Your grandfather contacted me 3 months ago," Camila explained. "He'd been gathering evidence, documenting everything. He knew they'd try to sell the house once he was gone." "Why didn't he go to the police?" Madeline asked. "Because he wanted to give them a chance to come clean," I realized, remembering Grandpa's words about truth and storms. He was protecting the family until the very end. Detective Reyes reviewed the journal's contents. "This is enough to put them away for a long time. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy." Parker slumped against the wall. "I didn't know about any of this. I swear." "No," Madeline said sadly. "You just went along with it. Like we all did. Until now." I opened Grandpa's journal to the last entry. His familiar handwriting brought tears to my eyes. "My dear Elijah, if you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't, exposed the truth while protecting what matters most, our family's real legacy. Not the money or the foundation, but the courage to stand up for what's right. I'm so proud of you, my boy." As the police finished their work, Madeline, Parker and I stood in the study, watching the sunrise through Grandpa's stained glass windows. Our family would never be the same, but maybe that was exactly what we needed. The morning light streamed through freshly cleaned windows as I sipped coffee from Grandpa's favorite mug. Madeline sat across from me in the study while Parker helped Camila carry in the last of the restored family photos. "The foundation board confirmed it," Camila said, reviewing documents at Grandpa's antique desk. "Once they verify all the financial records, they can begin rebuilding the foundation's work. They want you to consider taking a board position." "I don't care about a board seat," I said. "I just want Grandpa's legacy restored." Parker hung the final framed photo, Grandpa on the courthouse steps after winning his landmark civil rights case, in its original spot. "He always said justice was a family business," Madeline smiled, running her hand along the frame. Parker cleared his throat. "Listen, Eli, about everything." "I know," I cut him off. "You're sorry. But sorry doesn't fix this." "No," he agreed. "But maybe this will help." He pulled out a stack of papers. "I'm testifying against everyone involved. All of it." Madeline gasped. "Parker, Aunt Victoria will never forgive you. So is living with shame." He set the papers down. "Grandpa taught us better than this." The doorbell rang. Madeline answered it and returned with Detective Reyes. "Good news," she announced. "Your aunt and uncle took the plea deal. They'll serve time, but their cooperation means we can recover most of the misappropriated funds." "And the foundation?" Madeline asked. Being restructured. But the legitimate programs will continue. Your grandfather's legacy is safe now. I walked to the fireplace, touching the brick where I'd found Grandpa's letter. He knew this would happen. All of it. He knew we'd make the right choice eventually, Madeline said, joining me. Even if it took some of us longer than others. Parker picked up one of Grandpa's law books, running his fingers over the worn binding. Remember how he used to say, "Justice delayed is still justice, but truth can never be silenced"? Camila and Detective Reyes started gathering their things. The house is officially yours now, Camila said. No more legal challenges. What will you do with it? Detective Reyes asked. I looked around at the bookshelves lined with legal volumes, the framed photos documenting a lifetime of fighting for justice, the desk where Grandpa had written landmark briefs. Exactly what Grandpa wanted, I said. Make it a home for truth again. A real one this time. Madeline squeezed my hand. Parker nodded, understanding. Later, as evening light painted the study in amber, I found one last note tucked inside Grandpa's journal. Remember, Elijah, betrayal cuts deep, but redemption heals deeper. Some families must break before they can rebuild. Love always, Grandpa. I closed the journal, smiling. He was right as always. The house wasn't just my inheritance. It was my chance to rebuild something better from what we'd lost. And this time we'd do it right.